This is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Robin Dwyer. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. At least 50 Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strikes, as the World Health Organization warns tens of thousands are trying to flee central Gaza. Israel says the time for diplomacy is running out as militant group Hezbollah carries out more attacks from Lebanon. Italy considers its next moves to deal with the migrant crisis amid a record number of arrivals in 2023. And Moscow's diamond industry loses its lustre as the 12th round of EU sanctions take effect on Russia's economy. Palestinian authorities say at least 50 people have been killed in the latest Israeli strikes in Gaza. Israel has widened its ground offensive in recent days, despite pleas, including from its closest ally, the United States, to scale down the campaign. Aid agencies say that Gaza is grappling with catastrophic hunger, while the United Nations report says there's also a rapid deterioration of human rights in the occupied West Bank. Fighting is also intensifying on the Israel-Lebanon border, with a warning from Israel that it will act to remove the armed group Hezbollah if attacks continue. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent in Tel Aviv, Trent Murray. So, Trent, Israel pushing ahead with its advance as calls for a ceasefire continue.
Yeah, Robin, that's right. The IDF has announced is actually adding additional troops to its ground operation within the Gaza Strip, with a particular focus on the south. The IDF saying it will concentrate its attention around the southern city of Khan Yunis. Now, that has got a lot of UN agencies concerned because, of course, Khan Yunis is being used as a major evacuation hub for civilians who have had to flee the fighting in the north and the central part of Gaza. But from the IDF's part, they are saying they're upping the ante there somewhat because they believe the Hamas leadership is hiding out within that particular part of the strip and in the underground tunnel network, which they are continuing to try and detect and destroy. But it does come as the pressure grows somewhat on the Israeli government to lay out a timeline for when it's going to move away from its high-intensity operation to a more targeted one. And there is renewed focus today on a particular incident which took place on Sunday. Now, we're talking about an airstrike which occurred in the Al-Maghazi refugee camp. The Hamas-run health ministry said 70 civilians were killed in that strike. We can't independently verify that number, but the Associated Press was on the ground when it occurred and said they saw dozens of civilians killed. Well, we have an update today, and that is the IDF has issued a statement to Israel's public broadcaster, and I'm going to quote here: "The type of munition did not match the nature of the attack, causing extensive collateral damage which could have been avoided." They go on to say, "The IDF regrets the harm to those who are uninvolved and is working to learn lessons from the incident." So in other words, a mistake was made causing the death of dozens of civilians. It is those types of incidents which is causing real pressure to grow on Israel to announce a humanitarian ceasefire, including from Paris. French President Emmanuel Macron speaking with Benjamin Netanyahu overnight. The Elysee Palace is saying he asked the Israelis to work towards an enduring ceasefire.
Well, let's talk about the situation on Israel's northern border, because it says that the time for diplomacy is running out as Hezbollah carries out more attacks from Lebanon.
Yeah, the stopwatch for a diplomatic solution is running out was the exact phrase used by Benny Gantz, a very senior Israeli politician. He's now the war cabinet minister. That comes in response to a significant uptick, we really should say, in Hezbollah rocket attacks. In fact, we understand, according to Israel, that yesterday, being Wednesday, saw the largest number of rockets fired by Hezbollah into Israel since October 8th. Earlier today, we also saw incoming rocket sirens sound in Haifa in the north of Israel. That is the third largest city here. Very rare for rockets to make it that far south from the northern border. The Israelis say they shot down a drone which had been launched by Hezbollah in Lebanon, and that comes as Benny Gantz and other senior figures within the Israeli government are saying publicly now that it's time for the Lebanese government in Beirut to try and rein in Hezbollah and its rockets attacks. They're saying if that doesn't happen, then the IDF will do it for them.
Trent, thank you very much. Our correspondent Trent Murray in Tel Aviv. Well, that's the view from Israel. Let's head now to Gaza and talk to our correspondent there, Noor Harazin. So, Noor, what more can you tell us about these latest Israeli attacks?
Yes, let's start from where I am, inside the Shuhada Al-Aqsa Hospital, which is located in middle Gaza. Since the very early hours of this morning, and there have been several Israeli strikes on the Al-Bureij refugee camp, Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, and also southern Deir al-Balah. The number of people that were killed in middle Gaza today is now up to 24 people only in middle Gaza. The Israeli forces are intensifying their attacks on specifically the Al-Bureij refugee camp. Just half an hour ago, eyewitnesses said that the Israeli tanks incursioned into the Al-Bureij refugee camp, stormed into Al-Bureij Girls Primary School and arrested the men that were sheltering inside the school. This school is actually housing now hundreds of families that evacuated their homes from eastern Al-Bureij camp to the west side of the camp. As I mentioned before, the Israeli bombing also had several other areas in Gaza, for example, Khan Yunis and also Rafah in southern Gaza. In one of the airstrikes, the Israeli warplanes hit the Az-Zuhur neighborhood, which is a neighborhood full of refugees, full of tents, and it was actually mentioned by the IDF as a safe area where Palestinians, displaced Palestinians, can go there for safety. So yes, the Israeli attacks on Gaza continues, the Israeli bombings, and all of this is happening while more people are forced to evacuate and leave their homes.
And Noor, we've had some fresh warnings from the UN's World Health Organization about what's happening to those people fleeing these attacks.
Well, actually, people are fleeing the attacks to face more attacks. As I mentioned, one of the Israeli strikes overnight hit the Az-Zuhur camp, which is now housing thousands of Palestinians. And all of this is happening while the Gaza Strip and the people of Gaza are facing Gaza's worst humanitarian crisis. 1 out of 4 Gazans is now starving due to the lack of access to water, clean water to drink, access to food. There is no food, and the very little amount of aid that is being allowed from Egypt is not enough to meet the needs of the people. And now, over the past 2 days, we have even more people evacuating their homes from the Al-Bureij refugee camp and Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, and they actually have nowhere to go. Some of the people are taking shelter on the sides of the walks. Some of them are in UN schools that are already overcrowded, and some of them in hospitals. However, the attacks on hospitals in Gaza also continues, as what happened in Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza.
Al-Auda Hospital is in Jubalia refugee camp, northern Gaza, and once provided basic medical services for more than 116,000 refugees in the area. Now it's out of service. In mid-November, the Israeli army issued an evacuation order for both patients and displaced people inside the hospital. But hundreds of people, including medical staff, were unable to leave, fearing the heavy shelling around the medical complex. On November the 21st, Doctors Without Borders said 2 of its staff had been killed by an Israeli strike on the hospital. Tens of other medical staff and displaced people were killed in other raids on the building.
My colleague was in this room. She walked to bring supplies, but Israeli snipers started shooting. As you can see here and there, she was shot here and fell down. And then the army shelled this bridge between the units.
On December the 13th, the Palestinian Health Ministry reported that 240 people were trapped in Al-Auda Hospital. Surrounded by Israeli snipers, they had no access to clean water or food. Israeli forces then stormed the hospital, destroying several buildings and arresting dozens of men.
It was a blockade on the hospital. Israeli snipers shot at anyone who moved. The army then separated us, forced us to take off our clothes and examine us. After that, they released some of us and arrested others, including medical staff.
The Palestinian Health Ministry in Gaza says 23 hospitals and more than 50 clinics in Gaza have shut down since October the 7th due to Israeli attacks on medical facilities and the lack of fuel and supplies. Noor Harazin, CGTN, Gaza.
Beijing has repeated its call for Chinese citizens to leave border towns close to Myanmar as fighting between the country's military and rebels in the region intensifies. Clashes have been escalating since 3 rebel groups joined forces in October to launch a military operation against the Myanmar government. That's despite the rebels signing a ceasefire deal mediated by China earlier this month. Beijing has urged all parties to show restraint. At least 40 people have been killed after a gas tanker crashed and exploded in Liberia. The truck overturned into a ditch and people rushed to the site to take the leaking fuel when the blast happened. Dozens of others are in hospital with serious burns, and officials say that the death toll could rise. The United States has approved another $250 million in military aid for Ukraine, but it marks the last funding available without fresh approval from Congress, where talks have stalled. An agreement on further arms has been stopped by Republicans, who say tougher security measures on the US-Mexico border must be part of any future military aid deal. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, we look at Italy's migrant crisis after a record number of arrivals in 2023.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. At least 50 Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strikes as the World Health Organization warns tens of thousands are trying to flee central Gaza. Israel says the time for diplomacy is running out as militant group Hezbollah carries out more attacks from Lebanon. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has admitted there is no quick fix for the country's migrant crisis, despite her election promises to deal with it. The European country received a record number of arrivals from the Mediterranean this year, but it's hoped that the EU's landmark deal to reform the bloc's migration policy will help cut that number. Our correspondent Hermione Kitson reports.
Scattered debris of doomed voyagers are now common scenes on the shores of Italy. In February, at least 94 migrants died after their boats smashed into rocks off the coast of Calabria, and the toll continued to rise as other boats suffered the same fate. This year, there was a 150% increase in arrivals.
2023 was defined as one of the worst years regarding boat arrivals in Italy.
Curbing migration was one of Prime Minister Meloni's key policy platforms before being elected, but she's since admitted there's no quick fix.
So at the end of this year and after 14 months of Meloni government, the objective is failed.
In July, the European Union finalised an agreement with Tunisia, a common departure point to stem irregular migration.
The partnership with Tunisia has to be considered as a model for building new relations with North African neighbours.
However, the boats continued to arrive. In September, the hotspot of Lampedusa was inundated, and the EU chief travelled there to see the situation firsthand. Now it's hoped a landmark reform of the bloc's migration policy, announced just before Christmas, will make a difference.
And the proposals we have tabled and are being approved today recognise that every member state has issues that need to be addressed on a comprehensive, holistic European migration policy.
Under the deal, which needs to be ratified by the European Parliament, countries in the south will toughen up and speed up their asylum procedures. Member states not on the bloc's borders will either have to share the burden or pay to take in fewer migrants. There are also plans for more border detention centres.
In its latest bid to curb migrant flows, the Italian government announced a 5-year deal with Albania, which would involve offshore processing. But the plan has been temporarily blocked by the Albanian Constitutional Court.
Under the agreement, the Italian government would build 2 centres to process 36,000 people hoping to reach Italy each year.
I definitely think that Italy can't and shouldn't have to confront this situation by itself. But agreements with countries that are not even part of the EU will not resolve the situation.
My opinion is that this will not work at all and will not resolve any of the problems we have.
The theme is sure to be a key battleground during the European Parliament elections in 2024. In the meantime, on the eve of a new year, migrant flows show no sign of slowing down. Hermione Kitson, CGTN, Rome.
Let's talk now to Satvinder Just, who's Professor of Law at King's College London. Good to see you, Professor. Welcome to the programme. So migration, of course, a key issue in politics for many EU countries. Is it as big a problem as that would suggest?
Yes, and your program has already referred to that. The fundamental point here is this, that the rich world is in the middle of an unprecedented migration boom. Its foreign population is rising now faster than it has ever done at any time in its history. Last year, Britain got 1.2 million migrants. Australia has received twice that rate that it had before the COVID-19 pandemic. Spain's figure is at an all-time high. The United States, 1.4 million, which is a third higher than what it had during the pandemic. And of course, the migration crisis of Germany of 2015 that we're all familiar with is dwarfed by the level of migration that they're currently getting. So the fact is that people are on the move, and they're on the move because they have to, on the basis of climate change, turmoil, ethnic strife, war zones, and other forms of misgovernment in their country. And that's simply a fact of life that the West has to deal with.
So the EU has this plan to try and deal with this. We've seen this landmark deal announced. What do you make of it? Do you think it's going to address the problem?
Well, it's not going to address the problem. For this reason, 76% of the world's refugees are currently in poor income countries. They simply do not have the capacity to deal with this. Now, you've just referred to the deal between Italy and Albania, where, ironically, it's the Albanian Constitutional Court which has said we're not up to this. We can't do this. We cannot build 2 centres to house 36,000 refugees per annum. In Britain, where I'm based at the moment, the Rwanda deal between this country and Rwanda has led, ironically again, to the Rwandan government saying that actually if this is going to lead to a violation of fundamental principles of international law and so on, we're not going to be a party to this. So, you get these effectively third world countries which are outside Europe are being burdened with a problem which is unethical anyway. I mean, unethical in this sense. Why should the richer world feel it right to dump their problems on the poorer parts of the world by giving them monetary inducements? That's the moral imperative. The legal imperative, of course, is this, that implicit in the Refugee Convention is the idea that when people come to your shores and you're a signatory to the Refugee Convention, the duty is on you to process their asylum claims. It's a violation, a total violation of the spirit of the Refugee Convention to buy off poorer countries and to say, you can have the problem there. And the third thing here is this. It's not just to do with the countries outside the EU. The pact that has just been agreed actually puts a bigger onus on the frontier countries on the rim of the EU. That's Spain, Greece and Italy. Those are the countries to which migrants coming from Afghanistan, Syria and Africa first enter before they come into the common travel area. And what's happening here is this: rather than act on the basis of communal and European solidarity, support those countries with proper asylum procedures, fair and adequate procedures, fully funded, relocation within the EU so that people are scattered across the richer parts of the EU, Germany, France, and Britain. What's happening is that the burden is being foisted on those outer rim countries, so that it's up to them to reach in deals, which is what Italy has done. They've embarked on a deal with Albania. It's for them to really deal with this offshoring of asylum seekers. And again, the big irony here is this, isn't it? These countries are already having great difficulty dealing with onshore asylum claims. How on earth are they going to be able to deal with offshoring these asylum claims? It's a complete mess. It really is from every point of view, and it's not workable.
Professor Juss, it's great to talk to you today. Thank you for joining us. That's Satvinder Juss from King's College London. Donald Trump is to remain on Michigan's Republican primary ballot in next year's race for the White House. That's after the state's Supreme Court struck down attempts to disqualify the former president over his role in the 2021 Capitol Hill riots. Colorado's Supreme Court earlier this month barred Trump from running as a Republican candidate. The leader of the DPRK, Kim Jong-un, has ordered the military to accelerate war preparations, including its nuclear program, to counter what he called unprecedented confrontational moves by the United States. Kim's speech suggested a record year of weapons testing will continue in 2024 in defiance of international sanctions. It comes after the US, South Korea and Japan deepened their defence cooperation this year. The European Union has introduced its 12th package of sanctions against Russia, which for the first time targets the country's diamond industry, one of Moscow's most important revenue streams. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova reports.
Russia is the world's largest diamond producer. Around a third of the world's rough diamonds come from mines in the Russian Far East. When these Siberian stones are extracted, they make their way onto the global market.
The problem for Western countries is that 95% of diamond polishing in the world is conducted in India, while Belgium, the only European country engaged in diamond trade, serves only as an intermediary between Russian and Indian manufacturers. So the final destiny for Russian stones will stay the same. It's India. The question is how they get there, through Belgium or other countries.
Russia has already taken steps in anticipation of the ban. Its diamond monopoly, Alrosa, is diverting its diamonds away from Belgium. It's expected to sell more of its gems directly to India or use diamond exchanges in the UAE or Israel. And the ban brings a new challenge for Western countries. They have to find a way to track the origin of diamonds.
This poses a huge problem. How do they enforce their own sanctions?
How do they track whether a stone was mined in Africa, for example, or whether it came to them from Yakutia in Russia?
The ban has been debated by the EU for months and comes amid a plunge in diamond prices. The price of a 1-carat diamond has fallen more than 20% this year, as demand has weakened with the global economy. The world's two biggest producers recently paused diamond sales to stop a collapse. Experts predict the Russian diamond ban will benefit the market and intermediaries, whose earnings have fallen.
There is an excessive supply of diamonds from De Beers and Alrosa, so there is a reaction. European intermediaries are also interested in this. Their margins are falling, demand is low, so they say, let's impose restrictions.
Russian companies expect additional transactional costs because of the sanctions, but not significant ones.
In Russia, the attitude is that Western sanctions complicate things, but the economy is able to adapt. The diamond industry is not expected to be an exception. Dasha Chernashova, CGTN, Moscow.
Chinese smartphone giant Xiaomi has unveiled its first electric vehicle, the SU7, in what is the world's largest EV market. It's also launched its first electric vehicle technology in Beijing. Our correspondent Gao Ang reports.
Here, Xiaomi's chairman and CEO Lei Jun unveiled the company's latest technologies, ranging from electric motors and batteries to intelligent driving and smart cabins. Through dedicated efforts over the next couple of decades, Lei also announced Xiaomi's ambitious goal to become one of the world's top 5 automakers.
Creating a good-looking, easy-to-use, comfortable and safe smart mobile space is the goal we want to improve on. This goal is actually not easy to achieve. I've known from the first day that there's only one way, which is to start from the fundamental core technology.
Xiaomi has pledged to invest over 10 billion yuan, more than $1 billion, in the first phase of research and development. Lei highlighted importance of Xiaomi's smart cabin tech and its ecosystem. He also addressed the concerns about the performance of electric car batteries in winter, a leading concern for many EV users.
Xiaomi prioritizes research and development into batteries. We've also built our own electronic factory to guarantee their performance and quality.
Xiaomi joins other tech giants like Huawei and Baidu, which have also ventured into the rapidly growing Chinese EV market. Officials say China leads the world in automotive and EV sales, with battery-powered vehicles accounting for about 60% of global sales. This success is also spreading globally. Chinese brands have accounted for about 8% of new EVs sold in Europe in 2023, up from 6% last year. Expanding their business into the sector could pose a challenge, but the recent moves by Chinese tech giants shed light on the huge opportunities in the country's vast EV market. Gao Ang, CGTN, Beijing.
Our headlines again. Dozens of Palestinians are killed in the latest Israeli strikes, as the World Health Organization warns tens of thousands are trying to flee central Gaza. And Israel says the time for diplomacy is running out, as militant group Hezbollah carries out more attacks from Lebanon. And that is the world today. Thanks for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of the hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.